In this video, I'll be talking about how to build React Native applications with a Supabase backend. And more specifically, I'll be talking about issues that you're likely to run into using React Native with Supabase and how I resolve them. Okay, so I'm going to start by running an application here just so that you can see the errors that come up and how we might fix them. So let's start the Metro server. Okay, I actually have the application running, but as you can see, there's nothing being displayed at the moment. So let's reload. And now we see some errors. The first is cannot read property get item of undefined, and then the other one cannot read property href of undefined. Okay, so the first error is because the library is trying to access the local storage object, which is only available on the web. So on React Native, we'll need to use an alternative, and we can use async storage for that. So in order to do that, we need to go to where we instantiate our Supabase client, and we need to pass in an options object. And for the local storage option, we are going to pass in async storage. Okay, so let's refresh. Now we have one error remaining, the one about the href. And here, Supabase is trying to detect session information in the URL of the search bar, which does not really apply to React Native. So we need to pass in another option to tell Supabase that we don't need to do that. So we say detect session in URL false. And now we get to a new error. URL search parameters set is not implemented. Okay, and this is because the React Native doesn't really implement all the functionality of the URL object, so we need to fill that gap with a polyfill. And for that, I am using React Native URL polyfill, and to use it, you just import it in your index file. Okay, and now we actually get in data. So we have resolved those issues, and I think those are the main things that we need to address when we're building React Native applications with Supabase. But there's one final thing that I want to talk about, and that is how you handle third-party logins with Supabase and React Native. You might be used to using something like the native Google or Facebook SDK to handle logins, and then you would connect it with the Firebase library by passing in a token. But Supabase doesn't really support that method at the moment, so we'll need to implement the OAuth process. And the way you do that typically is by calling a URL and passing a callback URL that your application detects and extracts session information from, and you use that to log in. But in order to do that on the mobile side, we need to use deep linking, and that's a relatively straightforward process. It's documented on the React Native website, but I'll just go over how you do it here. You first need to, for iOS, you need to go to your plist file, and in the bundle URL schemes, you just add your custom name. I'm using Island Vibe for my application, but you'll use your own name. And then for Android, we'll need to set it in the manifest file. Okay, we set an intent filter and use Island Vibe as the scheme and app as the host. And the final step is that you will need to set your site URL in your Supabase auth configuration. Oh, and that's basically, well, no, there's one final step. In our application, we'll need to listen for that callback URL, and it contains a hash character that we need to change to a question mark so that we can pass it to the URL search params object so that we can get back the refresh token, and with that token we can use it to sign in. And that's basically how you would handle login with OAuth. And to test it out, I'll log out. All right, so I can now log in. And it redirects me to the URL. Oh, that's something that I forgot to, the URL that we redirect to, it's in this form. It's our application Supabase URL, and it's the Google provider, and we redirect to our Supabase callback URL, which is the site URL that we specified in the configuration. And okay, to log in, we just open that URL with the linking library, and that initiates a process, and when it's complete, it calls our callback URL, and that is what we just handled. So that's basically all I have for the moment. Just a few issues that I've run into with React Native and Supabase. Thank you for watching.